لیست نکنه احتمالا نگو نپرس بوده اجازه میکنه خودش
از زیر سنگ به دنیا آمدی
خب بس برای که معدنچی هم باید میدونستم اونو بسا نمیدونستم در رابطه با رشتهشون توی اکسپریمنت فیزیک بوده و قسمت تخصصی کار کردن روی electromagnetic principles to real life problems و استفاده از الکترومگنتیک برای مسائل واقعی و اجرایی و به طور خاص روی بدن انسان. حالا ما اینا یه خودش رو واسه انگلیسی فارسی بکنم.
انگلیسی فهم
و از این قسمتش هم میتونم هنوز سوالم میرسه که ترجمهش هم بکنم. قسمت بعدیشون اینه که ایشون بعد از فارغ التحصیلی به شرکت در حقیقت تلنت همکاریشون شروع کردن و در حقیقت مسئول تکنولوژی پیشرفته شرکت تلنت بودن که دوستانی که محلی هستن شرکت تلنت میشناسن وایرلس هستن و شرکت خوشنام خوبیه و ایشون در عرض 2 سال تونست خلاصه والیوم کار این دوستان رو تقریبا 2 برابر بکنه و احتمالاً تا هم 2 سال بود که ما والیوم کار IATC ما خلاصه نصف شد از حضور ایشون محروم بودیم. بعد از اون هم که ایشون با یه شرکتی به نام کاردیومک مشغول به کار شدن و اتفاقاً موضوعی که با کاردیومک کار کردن موضوع تز دکتراشون هم بوده که در رابطه با حالا خودشون هم لطفاً برای چند دقیقه صحبت کنم ولی راجع به اصطلاح مانیتور کردن قلب و حالا ارتباط الکترومگنتیکی که اون دیوایس‌های دیگه داره مانیتورینگ داشته کار کردن. حالا من دیگه وارد جزئیاش نمیشم. قسمت آخرش هم این که ایشون at the present time he is a government contractor working as an advisory and support role for Treasury Office of Chief Information Officer و به اصطلاح نقش ایشون هم و به اصطلاح همکاریشون در رابطه با business, IT, security, investment and strategic decisions, challenges and issues that face today's large organization. فقط تشکر میکنیم که مجددا وقتی گذاشتن برای ما مطلبی آماده کردن و تشکر میکنم از دوستانی که تشریف آوردن و شاید خدمتتون مطلب بشه.
خیلی ممنون. Thank you very much for the introduction. اگر مشکلی نیست من اگه انگلیسی صحبت کنم راحت‌تر میشه چون بعضی از این کلمه‌ها رو وقت نکردم به فارسی ترجمه بکنم. مقدار سخت میشه. همونجوری که دکتر رستمی عزیز فرمودن من رشته‌ای که اول شروع کردم رشته مورد علاقه قلبیم بود که ببینم چجوری دنیا به اصطلاح کار میکنه. توی دنیای فیزیکس رفتم ولی خب باز اونجا خیلی به انجینیرینگ علاقه‌مند بودم، خیلی به بیولوژی علاقه‌مند شدم. در یه زمانی مگنیتوتکتیک بکتریایی که تو بدنشون مغناطیس درست میکنن و نیرو مغناطیسی زمین اینها رو به اصطلاح زاویه بهشون میده که بعد وقتی که حرکت میکنن اگه اونایی که میرن ته پاند و اینها زنده میمونن، اونایی که میان بالاشون اناروبیک هستن از بین میرن. یه مقدار توی دوره آندرگراجویت با بین فیزیکس و بیولوژی در اون موقع که ما پیرمردا میرفتیم مدرسه معمولا زیاد رابطه خوبی نبود. الان حالا به اصطلاح اینترلاک شدن و بایوفیزیکس و اینجور چیزا هم هست ولی اون موقع به ما میگفتن تریدر که ما مثلا رفتیم کلاس بیولوژی برداریم مولکولار بیولوژی برداریم ولی خب من اینو که نگاه کردم دیدم واقعا مسائلی که توی بیولوژی هست وقتی نگاه می‌کنید خیلی سخت‌تر هست از فیزیک تا یه حدودی به خاطری که شما نمیتونین همون چیزی که بخواید اون به اصطلاح وریبل‌ها توش بسیار زیاده و تحت کنترل شما هم نیستن. در نتیجه شما بایستی مثلا توی فیزیک شما درجه حرارت رو ثابت نگه می‌دارید، پرشر رو زیاد می‌کنید، اینا رو میتونید کنترل بکنید ولی توی بیولوژی بسیار سخت‌تر میشه. مثلا یه سامپلی که ما می‌گرفتیم 6 ساعت بعد کاملا با اون موقع اولی که گرفته بودیم توش فرق می‌کرد. موجودات زنده کیمیکال بالانس و اینها همه فرق. ولی بعد از اون من به اصطلاح بعد از اینکه از دانشگاه گریجویت شدم تو اون رشته‌ای که کار می‌کردم یکی از به اصطلاح سنسیتیو ترین مگنتومترها رو درست کرده بودم و برای قلب یا هر قسمت بدن که توش الکتریکال کرنت رد میشد شما میتونستید مگنتیک فیلد رو از اون اندازه بگیرید. اون کاردیومگ ایمیجینگ هم یک شرکتی هست که هنوزم هست و دستگاهی به اصطلاح استفاده میکنن که you let the patient lie on the bed laughing is you scan the sensor, which is made out of squid magnetometer, superconductive quantum interference device magnetometer, above the heart, and every time the currents flow through the heart, they generate magnetic field, but it's very, very small. It's like 1 million times smaller than the Earth's ambient magnetic field. So you have to have very, very sensitive drugs. But you don't need any leads like EKG or so. And based on the both the temporal and spatial distribution of magnetic fields, you can see, you can have 3 times more sensitive, this device is 3 times more sensitive than a regular 12-lead EKG in detection of ischemia. So basically, in normal conditions, if the currents flow on the normal path, you see a certain magnetic field. If there is ischemic region resistance, changes in that area, currents have to go around it, and that changes the magnetic field in a nutshell. No radiation, no X-rays, 2 minutes of just lying down on the bed, and you can also do stress tests and so on. But big companies that have captured the market so far, including Lowex companies, GE, and so on, they have a pretty good grip and pretty high momentum. And so the entrance to medical market for new technology requires good plus 30 million plus investment. So some small companies can't make it up. But what I'm here to talk to you about today, before you fall asleep, is something that I'm doing now because I didn't want to travel so much to New York and come back. And so another area that I found very interesting and very challenging indeed is an area that basically is an optimization problem to me. That you have so many variables, and you have to follow the art of how to balance all of these different variables to be able to maximize benefits and profit. The field is known as enterprise architecture, and what I'm talking about basically how proper business and IT alignment can help improve an organization's effectiveness in accomplishing its missions and objectives. Today, more than ever, businesses rely on information systems and information technology so embedded that you can hardly think that they will be able to function without it. But there is, of course, a lot of caveats associated with you investing in information technology. There's cost, risks, lots of different things. So it's become a very big issue for the past 40 years, and it's growing. Just recently, Office of Management and Budget, which is basically the department that is controlling the funding to all the other departments within the government, basically has provided a draft version of a study that I took some extracts from it, and I'll read it out loud real quick. It basically says in the federal government, IT infrastructure expenditures are on the rise rather than on the decline, because in the past they were claiming that if you use certain methodologies, you'll be able to reduce the cost of IT. But the data shows that it's still on the rise. And $26 billion was invested last year in IT infrastructure alone, and that's about almost 40% of the $67 billion that U.S. is spending on IT. And this is probably not the full cost of IT. Okay, that's what's being reported. So this is a multi-billion-dollar question: is how do you get the maximum? How do you optimize this problem for not just government but any organization, whether they're small or large? The cost of IT being a significant subset of about 30% of the budget for the Treasury, 35% of the budget for U.S. Treasury is IT costs. So it's very significant. And basically
Sorry, can we ask a question?
Sure. Actually, let's keep it really informal. We have so many more slides that I can finish in one night. So
just a quick one. So when you talk about IT expenditure. What is included in that? Because that is important to know to set this case.
Very good question. The infrastructure part could be your network, your hardware, your software costs, if you have cell phones, mobile devices, the components that are basically either physical or so on. The part about, let's say, the additional costs, I would say the IT staff, people that are involved with programming, developing software, and so on. Those are additional costs that come with IT.
Does it also include the great computing, fast, massive array of computations, which is
if government owns it,
yeah.
Yes. So, for example, let me see this slide here. This is part of the same study that came out. In this part, you will be able to see there is, based on what this study says, there's about 3.37 million federal employees, and the infrastructure cost was 23.6 billion, and where's the total IT spending? Let me see, total IT 67 billion. So if you look over here on this column, it kind of shows, if you divide the total cost by the number of FTEs or full-time equivalents, then you will see certain numbers. So anybody who is there, they have been costing the taxpayers somewhere, in the 10,000 range. And what I found that alarming over here, for example, Department of Energy here, based on this study, seems to be an outlier. I'm not sure if this data is right or not, but at least in this draft of study, it says $86,341 per FTE.
Per year?
Per year.
I
For
think
one employee.
That perhaps, my guess is that includes that great computing over software.
It may very well do. And so some of them are smaller, 5. Treasury is probably about 13, 14,000. But even $10,000, is not a small amount of money to say anybody who sits at a desk, there is that much cost. And this is an increasing cost. Healthcare cost is rising. That's in and of itself another issue. IT costs are rising, another issue. So just try to...
One more question on
Sure,
cost.
sure.
On other 39%, can you divide it to OPEX, CAPEX services? I mean, how much is CAPEX versus OPEX? Is that mostly OPEX or is it mostly CAPEX?
I would say the infrastructure part is CAPEX. So the infrastructure is, let's pick over here, for example, agriculture, 753 million. And let me see, total spending, percent of total is IT spending, 35. Probably it's better if I email you this so you can start looking at the numbers too. But it's still draft, as you can see, that the draft background, they haven't released it completely. But the point that I'm definitely trying to bring out over here is that this is a billion-dollar question, multi-billion-dollar question, very, very important. The serious implication of this trend is that the high and growing, this is what OMB said in this study, high and growing investment in IT infrastructure is crowding out agency capacity to invest in IT to support agency performance improvement opportunities. So it's now starting to basically dry up the funds for other important things. And here, in addition to support the operations and maintenance of current commodity IT infrastructure, agencies are underinvesting in modernization and new technology. So you end up with old technology because procurement takes a long time to begin with. Then you keep putting in money into this pot, and then now you can't invest into the new technology because you ran out of money, because your system is inefficient. So they're into this vicious cycle. The government is not the only entity that is suffering from this. Another factor that would compound the impacts of this is the fact that management is not always very strong at large organizations either. Leadership changes and people not wanting to take responsibility for ownership of a failed system. Usually the average life span, I would say, for the CIO, Chief Information Officer, in federal agencies is less than 3 years. So if every 2 years or so they keep moving around, they stay a little bit longer, they'll be liable, and I would probably think that they'll be responsible for what they have inherited. So, but mismanagement of IT projects and solutions are a major contributor. I don't know if you guys remember the FBI's virtual case management case where it was over $100 million, and basically the project, they knew for a long time that it's not going to meet their needs, but they didn't want to stop it. They spent another $17 million or so to do testing on it, and finally basically it blew up, and they had to stop it. It made the front pages of all the news and so on. I have some excerpts from it here if you're interested later on. But just wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background as to the challenge. When we talk about how to obtain alignment between business and IT in and as of itself, information technology in and as of itself, is not really useful unless you put it to work or something. So there has to be some business case, and IT has to be supporting the business, as opposed to some other systems where the systems are all funny and underdeveloped, that they actually force the business to have to perform a certain way so that your IT system can support it. In that case, I kind of look at it like this. I say the IT is holding the business as opposed to IT actually enabling and supporting the business. This is the case that you want to have. So, and it's not just, well, anyway, so obtaining alignment is a challenge by itself. Maintaining that alignment means that you have to keep on doing this over time, forever. Just like when you clean your room, it takes but a short amount of time before it gets dirty again. Cleaning databases, it also takes a short amount of time before it gets dirty again. Systems, look at your own desk, your desktop. How long does it take before it gets filled up with files that you don't need, right? So the same thing with codes and everything else. Information systems are just like everything else. There has to be this continuous cleaning, refreshing, and maintenance cycle. And usually people don't put that into their costs. Okay. So anyway, obtain and maintain maximum alignment between organizations' business objectives and information technology solution, while minimizing costs and maximizing benefits. This is dream come true. Yes.
In your experience, how often do you align business objectives with your IT? And the reason I'm asking is government every 4 years system changes and directives change, and so you probably your focus, business focus is different. Is this in addition to maintaining and cleaning up?
Yes, actually, every administration changes the priorities for the organization. Even sometimes the directors and secretaries and so on, when they come in, if a new person comes in, new changes will come in. Change in business process or mission of the organization and so on, objectives of that organization, has to be translated into the IT, so IT can information, technology, information system, so you can support that objective. And if you have a huge inertia between the two, they're going to be decoupled. You will not be able to accomplish it. So you have to make that inertia. You have to design. By design, it has to be designed to be scalable. It has to be flexible, modular. Usually, people don't want to think that hard when they want to make a decision, and so you end up with systems that are pretty much designed to do minimal, and then you keep patching it to be able to meet your other requirements. And doing this is very costly, and but it takes some people. Usually, people don't have any other choice, or when they're making decisions, so we only have $5,000. What can we do with it now? We'll worry about the other issues later. I thought I'd share with you some questions here, and information systems physical exam questions. Some of you who are in the field of medicine, when you do a physical exam, You look for certain signs to see and detect certain conditions that may not be desirable. So, for example, if you ask yourself, is the organization getting good value from its information system investment? Depending on how you answer that question, if your organization is getting good value, then you're in good hands. If not, like for example, can the organization's information systems keep up with the changing business needs? And the only business needs that don't change are probably businesses that are out of business. In today's market and world, change is constant. Change is the constant of the underlying constant. So if your IT or information systems can't really keep up with those changes, then you have limitations. Another key physical exam question for information system is the organization information system supporting or driving? Is it supporting or is it driving the business? Is the organization's information system well integrated or is it silo-based? This particular management team says, I want this thing to do this, just this, and I don't care who says what. This group says, I want to do this, just this, and I don't care who says what. Then they realize they're actually in one organization, they have to communicate. So they said, we build it this way and this way, now let's find a way for them to communicate. Oh, then you end up with redundancies here, and then you end up having issues with compatibility. It was built by different programming group, different architecture, different technology, different years. So you end up, in my words, you end up with a Frankenstein design, put different pieces of different things together. This is not really architecture. What I call this is deck building. And with that, when you want to build a building, let's say something this complicated, there's no way a human brain can keep all of these dimensions and requirements in one's mind. It has to be laid out on documentation based on proper standards and codes. That's when you get your architecture. But if you have an if you want to build a deck, for example, the contractor comes over there, small enough issue, draws on a piece of paper. All right, here's your architecture, because it's so simple. I already know every 8 foot I'm going to put a 6x6, and so on and so forth, and load variations 1/3, so on and so forth, and they build you a deck. So in IT, information systems design, as opposed to investing in an architect that would look at the whole process, its integration, and give you a really streamlined, well-designed entity that's holistic as a whole, people usually build a deck, and then build another deck, and then screw them together. And so they end up not really carrying. I have seen so many IT folks who don't even know how to draw the architecture of their systems. They just know how to code. And so I call them deck builders. So what happens in this, you turn on the light on deck 1 and the coffee maker on deck 3 goes on. So they haven't thought about these things. So anyway, so does the information system provide data with high degree of integrity, availability, and accessibility? If you have an organization where you can't trust the data you see, you will know what I'm talking about. If you want to access the data, it's somewhere in a database, but you don't have a way to get to it, and when you want to go there, system crashes, or it takes forever to load up, and so on, then don't have a well-architectured design. Does the benefit of organization's information system outweigh its cost? Pretty soon it becomes this heavy weight that you're carrying with you, and you can't get rid of it because you can't live with it, and you can't live without it. And does the organization have a clear short-term and long-term roadmap and investment, basically roadmap for investment and migration plan? Or is it that we're always just doing a knee-jerk reaction? Everything is just, oh, this thing failed, let's fix it. This thing failed, let's fix it. Can we think ahead? Does the information system enable accurate and efficient information exchange throughout the organization? If you have these problems, if any of the answers to these questions is no, then the solution will most likely include the need for proper enterprise architecture. And remember that I said you need to maintain this process. You need to have proper IT governance. And these are the things that people usually try to not invest in at the beginning, or they
question here,
Please.
So these are actually very good questions. Are these specific about IT and organization, or can be, for example, human resources, about financial systems? Or these are designed to address problems or severe problem that we're seeing?
I would see the parallel that you're bringing. It applies to anything, any organization, any process that is done properly, designed and functioned. It used to be, I do woodworking and things like that, and so I would look at the table and I look at the dimensions and how it was designed, and I would say this is a human creation, or I don't want to use creation for humans, but I don't know what else to use. Man-made thing, right? It took engineering, it took design. Later on, I got involved with music, and I started to feel that as well. I said, wow, this is also, in a way, design. When you look at the orchestra, it's a huge, very, very complex design. Then same thing with designing an organization, right? So even putting together the human resource part, doesn't matter, whatever part. These are all designs. They don't amount to a physical thing, but yet they're created up here. You go through a bunch of design. If you do a wrong design, you suffer. If you do a right design, you benefit from it. So I think it applies. Yes.
Since you're utterly familiar with their systems, I want to ask 3 questions. Number 1, today any entities are going with the governance structure based on ITU. Secondly, who has invested in SOA? And thirdly, who is looking for cloud computing? Because this is not their core business. They don't want to be in business of developing software.
Right. Absolutely. Well, you know, the fact that we haven't discussed SOA and cloud computing and what you indicated with the rest of the group over here, maybe better to answer that a little bit later on. Is that all right? But there's mandates from OMB. OMB has an Enterprise Architecture Program Management Office, and they have requirements for a number of years now to actually impose these type of governance processes and enterprise architecture, or else they're not supposed to get their money. But that's, people always find ways to play the game, right? So all right. So what I'd like to do is I want to show you some pictures, so you don't fall asleep. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna business IT common practices. IT solutions are often developed over time by different developers using different technologies under different leadership management. These all cause problems. Resulting cumulative information system suffers from redundancies, incompatibilities, limited integration, cost overruns, integrity, flexibility, and a lot of other issues that I'll just skip for now because I want to show you some other fun things. So in absence of proper architecture and governance process, your new IT solution purchased or implemented by the organization will be subject to the same issues. So for example, you say, okay, I don't like this system because it doesn't meet my business needs. Let's go buy a perfect system and put it here. How long does it take before the perfect system starts no longer being perfect? As soon as you have a change in your business, if you don't project it into that system, now it's not perfect anymore. And just give it a couple of years before the system starts becoming obsolete by itself, because we have this technology refresh cycle that's also impacting IT. When you build a building, this building was built a number of years ago. People don't come over and change the walls all the time. You know, some of them are load bearing. Nobody thinks about moving the elevator just by 1 inch so it looks better. But in IT systems, they say, why don't you move that button over here, add another one over here, twist this one over there. Well, if it wasn't built to handle that, just pushing that by here and so on might actually be more complicated and impact other areas, as you think. I'm just simplifying and give a simple example. Moving buttons may not cause that problem. Yes?
When we talk about the challenges in IT, which one is more challenging, the hardware part or the software part? Which one needs more?
I think the software part.
So that's
Hardware part has a tendency to basically be more standardized, I mean, companies are behind it. You get the specifications, and smart engineers will sit there and put it together and make them work together. Software part is more hidden. When they start building code themselves, you don't know what they did. They may not follow processes properly, standards, and so on. And so it's much more, it's much harder to fix than just the hardware part. Hardware part breaks down, you change another one, you get a better one. So I think it's software part. All right, so let me see what I have here for you. What is enterprise architecture? Before you get bored, if you forget everything else we said, enterprise architecture in concept is so simple it's ridiculous. Okay? It basically says, figure out what you have, find out what you want to have, and then come up with a good plan to get there. That's simple. Okay? So if you forget everything else we said, enterprise architecture has these three components: the as is, the to be, and the transition plan. So now you can leave. For those of you who are staying, we're going to add a little bit more complexity to it. As you can see, business is the driver, is at the top. And in this particular model, they have put data next, applications, and the underlying hardware or technologies afterwards. The concept is, if you've done database design or so on, you will see that first you do a business flow diagram. Then you build your conceptual data model, logical data model, and physical data model, and you'll be able to see the business actually is driving the data. And based on that, you say, what software do I need to be able to handle this process, and what kind of a hardware do I need to do? So it makes good sense this way. But IT folks usually get it the other way around, because they think they're the smarter ones and the business guys are but they don't recognize that without the business there will be no need for it. They could be hacking other systems, of course, but I don't know. So this is one other way to represent that the as-is environment, the business, data, application, and technology, which basically gives you the as-is and business drivers, the to-be, which is the same thing, and then the migration plan, and the standards and practices that guides you to do that. And what you have here is your models and in your I can't believe I forgot that word. It must have been the food. What's that? We'll get it. I'll remember. Framework. Framework. Yeah. This is an example of business architecture going through the concept of enterprise architecture, the as-is. Document your current way of doing business. I told you it's simple, right? Documenting current way of doing business. That's CMMI level 4, I would say. You could make it very complicated, or you could have it just... So, how many people do you know that actually document the way of doing business? It's a very simple concept. And then keep up with the changes on that as you get busy. You have to have a lot of free time, right? Associate the as-is capabilities to business requirements. Identify opportunities for standards process and so on. Move it over here to optimized process defined through re-engineering and your transition plans and so on. So, concept, I like to just keep it simple and staying with the concept. The same thing applies to your data architecture. What data you have, what you want to do, how do you want to migrate, applications, which one of the applications you want to get rid of, which ones you want to improve, where do you want to go. What would be the ideal? You don't have to necessarily reach the to-be architecture, right? You may change this plan halfway through. But the fact that you have a plan makes you a proactive. It makes it a proactive process as opposed to, oops, this thing fell, let's go fix it now. Oops. You'll never be able to plan how much money you're going to need for maintaining your system. So I had a friend who was saying when he was in college doing one of those great jobs that everybody does when they're in undergrad, he was in a hotel, and the hotel had maybe 10,000 light bulbs, and his job was to go find which light bulb is burnt, and that he would actually go change that one. So the problem was he had to get this tall elevator, ladder, pull it over there, go all the way up, come back there, look back. It was a very cumbersome process. So he was a smart, he came over there and said, well, I convinced my manager that as opposed to me being so inefficient, he calculated the average lifespan of a light bulb was 20 days for that hotel, or 30 days. So if I start from here and change every one of these light bulbs and go one full round, by the time I finish the round, I'm about 70%, 80% through the average, lifespan of a light bulb. So I just kept doing that. It made me more efficient, and the lights were always on, as opposed to going the wrong way. So, it depends on how you want to go. Architecture can bring that kind of a light to the organization, bring in efficiencies. You may have heard quality is free. Because if you don't follow quality principles, you don't do quality control, the damage it will cause you is much more than if you don't. Can you imagine the medical industry, for example, if you don't have quality control? Your name will go down. Lexus, you remember the first time Lexus came out, they had a problem, they pulled all the cars back. It actually worked in their advantage. They said, this is quality. Architecture is also free, because the amount of costs that you save, if you follow that simple processes, as opposed to this push to go ahead and follow your first intuition, just fix it, forget it, deal with that thing later. If you do that, you will see. So why do we need EA? The role of EA is not only to document how things are being done, but to work collaboratively with the organization resource base to find ways to implement grand ideas of government in order to better achieve the mission. Thinking out of the box. If you think out of the box all the time, you're an architect. EA is a facilitator. If you lie a lot, you're an architect. Just kidding. An enabler, a motivator, information source, salesperson. You have to deal with a lot of people. People don't like changes. Some of them don't, right? Some of them actually think of change as a threat. They've invested a lot of time to come up with that thing. Now they want to protect it with all their might. So you're walking fine lines at times. So there's a lot. It's tough. It's through delivery of consistently high quality analysis and highly crafted communication that EA function can be one of significant intra and intra-organizational impact. So basically, it's not easy. Told you we get the pictures, so now you can don't fall asleep with the text. Let's look at this simple process. Okay. When you want to make a simple change in a simple system, you ask yourself the question, what are the effects of this change? You say, what tools do we need to predict the outcome before making the change? How can we minimize the risk? How can we minimize the cost? How can we minimize the resource need? And how can we minimize the time required for the change? If you ask these questions and come up with the answers, what you're doing is you're engineering. And you're actually doing the engineering part before you do implementation. It makes sense in engineering processes to design before you implement. Everybody does that, right? Would you change a process without evaluating the consequences, verifying its compatibility, evaluating long-term, short-term benefits, determining the cost of change, analyzing risk, impact on the other systems, so on, so on, so? Would you do that? Would you do that? If you say, no, I would never do that, well, ask yourself, why is it that so many leaders in organizations go ahead and sign billions of dollars in checks and do this without really thinking about the risk?
Yeah, okay.
Sure, please. Absolutely.
I want to take a situation that we are all facing day to day. All of us have computers, and we know that Microsoft is changing its operating system once in a while, or not even once in a while, every few years.
Patches, sure.
As a result of which, my computer become obsolete. After 2 or 3 or maximum 4 years, I have to get another computer. So is Microsoft really looking at all of this, or it's only incentive is its own commercial benefit or commercial objective. And what happens to the consumer? I mean, just who is protecting the consumer?
Right.
Because the consumer is at the mercy of Microsoft, and Microsoft keeps changing the operating system, and I have to buy a new computer, another new computer, and really I don't understand I don't see a big difference, between the earlier, I have an XP now and something new is coming up. Yeah, Vista is coming up.
Vista is going out.
And-
Going on.
Yeah. So, I mean, what is it in this, let's say, market economy, free market economy, and so on? What happens to the consumer?
I think it's a very good question. The function of Microsoft wanting to change new and come up with new products and so on is a different problem than this one. That one is its vitality. It's actually its mission is to create new products and to be able to sell. So if they can do that effectively, I would say they have a pretty good aligned organization. The organization is functioning properly. They have a good architecture for themselves. As opposed to, if we were to turn that around and ask ourselves, are we keeping up with the changes, or are those changes affecting us in a negative way? It's a reality of life, right? This laptop didn't exist 5 years before, so now we have to make changes. If we can adapt to the changes, then we have a right methodology, right solution for handling that change. There are differences between organizations that thrive in a change and organizations that actually go down. Let me give you an example. Federal Express. When they started their company, they started with small packages. Just the concept of being able to deliver packages across the globe in 24 hours was impossible to most people. It was to me. Once they went through this process and built that infrastructure, then they started realizing new opportunities became available to them. They didn't have to just limit themselves to this little package. They could then carry bigger packages. So now they went to freight transfer. So what you do is how you invest in things can help you build the so-called the infrastructure that will give you control. As opposed to, if they were to invest in a wrong way, haphazard way, Frankenstein is a liability type thing, it would actually become a liability. If it doesn't catch up with you today, it will be so costly and ineffective and inefficient that it's going to hurt you when it comes time for you to deal with new challenges and grow. So it's a short-term type view versus long-term view. You got to balance the two at all times. You can't also, on the other side, you can't stop progress because you don't have perfection. Right? So if you don't have a 100% solution, that's okay too. You don't have to have a 100% solution. But the cheapest solution is not always the best. And there is a price to pay. So I don't know if I answered your question in any way, but it's the reality of life to some extent.
The reality of
Right. I mean, things change.
So we have no protection.
No, I mean, whoever says you have protection, they're selling you something. The guy said that the guy was selling a turtle to a kid and said, "This is guaranteed." He says, "What is the guarantee?" And it says, "For the life of the turtle." So. All right. So let me see if I have more pictures. Oh yeah. Talking about complex systems. This is a phenomenally complex system. I just want to point out, there is not a single rivet in this structure that is allowed to be changed in composition, shape, or size without it going through a full change control process, testing and validation. Okay? That's why this thing flies and doesn't fail. Complex system, when you make changes to it, you need to know the consequences. You need to do engineering on it and then implement it. But do you know any IT problems that, even though it's a complicated system, all we do, how about if we twist this and so on? All right, it's working. All right, it's good. With architecture, building this, if you wanted to remove this wall, you're going to have to go get an architect, come over there, do load bearing calculations, give you approval that you can do it, get licensed contractors to do it, bring auditors to actually inspectors to make sure they've done their job right. Because if you don't do that, I think people would die. But in IT systems, you just lose money and your business falls behind. Most cases, in non-sensitive systems, people don't die. And for some extent, they haven't been following this process that's been followed in manufacturing. This process has been followed just everywhere in the engineering world. Medicine, whatever you, even oil industry follows extensive process control, change control, and so on. I claim that an organization is also a complex system. And when you want to make change, you have to think twice. So how is it that we don't think twice about this? And our leaders, when they sit at the table in the executive level, they come over there. It's not that they don't think. It's just that sometimes they close their eyes and sign on the line. And then we'll deal with the risk later. We got to move on. We got to move on. So then you end up with everything you've been building so far is going to go down the road because somebody changed the whole process. All right, so let me see if I can show you some more exciting stuff. All right, what is architecture? The science or art or profession of designing and constructing buildings and bridges. But here it also says any framework system. And let me see, the word enterprise, we can skip this. I think we killed enterprise architecture. Yeah, you got your complex system. This complex system was designed to carry you toward a mission. But how many times do we run into organizations that they're actually not aligned with their own mission? What they're doing is because somebody said, let's do it this way. But look, we're supposed to be doing that. This is a waste. So architecture, enterprise architecture, is not just IT. Goes over there, sits with the business, analyzes the business, says your business is not aligned with the mission. We need to make these changes, consider these changes, these options, to bring it more into alignment. Guess what? If you have the best IT solution that supports your business process, but your business process is not aligned with your mission, your solution is ineffective. First, you align the business with the mission, then you give them a good IT support. Information system.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
If you go back to that slide, do you think this is, and that's actually what I think, it looks like this is just for, most likely for government agencies, not for private business. Is that true?
I would take the other side, because if an organization, let's say small organization, they have to perform a certain thing or else they will not survive. They have to be sharper at hitting the target. Because the government agency, they get their budget year after year regardless of the performance. Okay, they get a slap on the hand by OMB, 10% deduction, so on, so on, so on. But an enterprise, and if you're out in the market by yourself and you don't do things the way you were supposed to, you're going to know very quickly. So it's actually more important, I think, in the small businesses and even large businesses. General Electric, for example, or all these, or look at GM and others. They don't hit their target, there's a big penalty to pay. That's the difference between a good architecture. Why is it that, let's say, some other companies, even now, are thriving as opposed to those who are actually falling behind? It goes back to the infrastructure. If you look at it, business is not aligned with the mission, you don't have proper communication within groups, roles and responsibilities are not defined. All those, simple stuff is ignored. The culture of the organization is wrong. It goes up to the leadership. Up to the leadership. Yes.
Excuse me, the view that you're presenting, it seems to me that you're trying to show that there is a holistic view that everything goes under the master level, integrated under the master level view that coordinate every interaction under this organization. There is another viewpoint that tries to decompose the main problem into independent components as much as possible, and each of them can, in a modular way can operate independently, and that is also some benefit to that. So they can replace on its own without disturbing other components. So how you view these two philosophies?
It's very simple. This is water, right? It's good for you. Drink too much of it is bad for you. There's got to be balance, the right balance for that organization. If an organization makes this cap, okay, they have to do it better, faster, cheaper than others. So if you have a creative group and so on that can help them in better, faster, cheaper in this area, then that's their purpose. But if you have a group that says, hey, let me just go in and think, like 3M, for example. How did 3M become so strong? They used to be sandpaper company. All of a sudden, they actually fostered the concept that you're saying. They gave autonomy to small groups, but there was a catch, right? You sink or swim with that thing. Your name was attached to it. So if they do it the right way, it will improve. So I think there's a balance. If they just go ahead and give everybody freedom to do whatever they want to do in organization, and don't look at everyone like yourself, that you're thoughtful, you're careful, you care, and so on and so forth. Not everybody's like that in organization. Why does your car have a key? The door to your home has a key. Because some people don't obey the law. If everybody would follow the law, mental, internal, whatever, there will be no thieves. There will be nobody breaking the laws and things. Everybody would work on the code of honor. In organizations, it's the same way too. Some people don't want to work, some people don't report, some people don't communicate, some people hide information, right? So when you build an organization, you can't build it based on a perfect example. You build it based on a system, a process that works. Google, they're successful because they ended up putting an environment that was basically conducive to creativity. If they were to block people from creativity, it would never grow. So what you're saying, there's a great deal of truth and correctness in it. It just has to be balanced for that particular organization. If you're an organization that builds shoelaces, you don't need as much creativity as an organization that deals with future robots. So everything has its own balance. You tailor it to your organization.
Those independent islands are guided or interconnected through governance strategy.
Absolutely. Everything has to have the right amount of connectivity. Nothing is ever disconnected unless they work probably for, let's say, special forces that have to go for disconnected. Not, there's a purpose for that too. But there's just finding that balance is right. Just like this table, you build it with 3 legs, there's steps. 2 legs, it won't. Same with organization. So just to tell some of you who've had IT background and so on, you've heard of the solution architect before. This is the person who writes the code. And then there came this other group that had a broader view, and they said, I don't want to just write one code. I want to look at an organization. I want to provide a system-wide solution. This could be an entire HR system. But that's still a part of the organization. Enterprise architect looks at the whole organization, and not just the organization, but everything else that's connected to organization. If you're this company, Deer Park, and you have business in China and everywhere else, all of those relationships are in your enterprise architect. Not just how your organization works, but everything about that is in your enterprise architect. So that's the difference between the whole organization. When you look at the whole thing, a complex system, then this is the system. This is a big system. The whole Boeing plus all of their shipments all around the world, that's your enterprise. So what I was trying to point out here is for any complex system, there are standards in drawing, in communicating, and capturing that complex architecture. There are standards in this design that show so that if you're an engineer in China versus an engineer in Japan or the United States, when you look at this, you can tell what they're doing. So that standardization allows you to communicate and to be able to create something that others can benefit or contribute to. And so following standards also in enterprise architecture will give you the same benefits. An architect who builds this building, give the blueprints to somebody in anywhere, they should be able to build exactly the same thing over there. So you need that standardization, and it does exist. The second thing that I want to say about overall picture of enterprise architecture is that it has a cycle. Like I said, create the balance and alignment and then maintain it. And the step one and the keystone for this thing is to obtain executive buy-in and support. You can't be going, you will lose energy if you want to go against the current. You want to be able to channel the energy of that river and get it to the right place. You got to obtain executive buy-in. Somehow you have to do that. If you can't do it, your train of success is already derailed. And you want to keep maintaining that support, because you could be 60% through and they say, okay, we're no longer believing you. Establish management of structure and control. Define an architecture process and approach, which we usually call the framework architecture. Develop baseline, this is the capture the as is. Develop target, that's the to be sequencing plan or the transition plan, and use the enterprise architecture to show value, put it in action. If you just do paper pushing, you're not going to be as, you're missing one leg of the table, because you're not showing value, you're going to start losing this. Maintain the enterprise architecture, there are tools for it, repositories and so on and so forth, and so this goes through this process. Question?
Section 6 is basically a talk.
Implement.
Implement or just a talk? It's a proof of concept.
No, this one actually, for example, says, all right, this is an organization that's big, it's Boeing, right? What you do, you say, okay, we want to take a segment architecture. We want to say, we're going to look at tire, aircraft tire, aircraft front wheel section. And then you look at that architecture. What is it related to, and so on and so forth. All that gets processed. You show value there. Then you go get funding for the rear tire.
What does you find fault in there? Why can't it, do you go through the testing or proof of concept before you implement it fully in one?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Remember, architecture starts high level. It's easier to have better aim and target when you're high level. It's like shotgun approach. We currently operate from 2 locations in the world. Your architecture says, from a location perspective, you have to be distributed to at least 20 locations within the world. Now, you didn't say where exactly. To be architecture says that. So you can do high level, and then you can go through the proof of concept. Question?
Going back to one of the earlier slides where you had the pyramid, suggested that it was basically business that was driving the whole, what I've noticed missing is, especially since you talked about the government and some of the problems associated with the cost overruns and things of that nature, where does politics come? Because that's really a very important segment there.
Whenever you see a line that goes across the whole thing, it means it's something that you deal with all the time. So standards and best practices go across here, but miraculously enough, they have eliminated the real factors there in this diagram. It's the hidden factors. If I was to do politics and organizational culture and other factors, I would actually draw that right here. You have a very good observation. That's actually one of the key reasons why these things are very hard to implement. Because it's not just a system thing, but systems engineers are good at doing mixing, putting systems together. Doesn't work, you read the manual, you figure it out. But the politics thing, plus all these leaders changing, politics from 2 weeks ago can be completely different now. We just went through one administration.
I think he's modest in his question.
Right.
Where does the corruption come?
Oh, absolutely. That's another line right there. Self-preservation. Yeah.
It seems to be a huge factor.
Major. This is the word art in here is there for a reason.
Yeah, I remember like a week ago or 2 weeks ago, there was a panel discussion about one of these intellectual things, at this C-SPAN. So the guy was coming back from Afghanistan and was making a presentation, and the theme of his speech was corruption in Afghanistan. Then one guy was sitting there. You mean it's worse than here? That made everybody just to grow up. So
These are big
politics and corruption.
Absolutely.
So what was the answer?
Oh, really? They laughed.
It's a fact of life.
There was no answer.
Somebody laughs and those are, they steal a lot of stuff.
This other group just takes the whole house with it, whole bank with it. Yeah, they did actually take the bank.
Show you another nice picture here. You say, okay, I'm sold on the original concept of this and that. How do you go about it? What information constitutes the architecture? What do you mean by architecture for an organization? A gentleman called John Zachman, who's about 78 years old now, but he's like a 5-year-old. Speaks so fast and so on and so forth. For the past 40 years, he's known as the father of enterprise architecture. I met him at a certification, enterprise architecture certification course that I was taking. And this is his original framework. It looks a little busy, but once I go through this thing real quickly, you will see that it's so simple. It's just as simple as architecture itself, and you can always remember this. The columns going from a top down basically says, okay, how can you describe the spectrum of fields or information that you need for an enterprise architecture? So, okay, look at these 6 words: the who, the when, you guess the rest, right? The what, the how, the why, and what's the other one? Why, when, who, where, how, and what. So, what is it you want to do? How do you want to do it? Where do you want to do it? Who's going to do it? When do you want to do it, and why? Simple. These 6. Then you say, okay, how am I going to organize this? Over here, it's basically